I said this first service, I don't even know what I'm doing up here. I mean, they just did the whole thing. They brought us from slumping in from the car to, wow! Oh my gosh. Wow. I'm Andrea Weatherhead. I'm a staff minister here at Center for Spiritual Living Seattle. And my pronouns are she and her. And this June, as James referenced earlier, we have a theme called We Are Family. And one of the fundamental principles from Center for Spiritual Living teachings is oneness. And oneness, as Kathy Ann describes it for this month, is we're connected and belong to each other. When we begin to perceive the beautiful web of life we're part of, it shifts how we show up in the world. You can depend on me to pray for you. You can depend on God to see you through. So if you read the newsletter, which I know you all religiously do, you would have seen that the title of this talk is called Only Connect, and that I was going to be referencing an author named E.M. Forster. Don't worry, this is not Literature 101. I will be referring to his works, though, because he is all about connection. One of the books that one of my favorites of his is called Howard's End, and on the first page by itself as the epigraph, it says, Only Connect. And it just feels so right for right now. When I was a college student, I read all of his books, and the reason I liked him was because he talked about connection across all kinds of cultural divides. He talked about the importance of connection between people who were socioeconomically different, culturally different, different identities, even crossing the connection between the inside of ourselves and our outside selves, all about connection. And he explored this really profound desire that we have as human beings for connection, and while also pointing out the challenges of connecting. Because our world is riddled, and his was too, with all kinds of cultural and societal divisions. Does that sound familiar? So in his early novels, you might recognize some of the names of these books, Where Angels Fear to Tread and Room with a View. He really pokes fun at the British culture, their stiff upper lip, their sort of reserved behavior, and they go to Italy as tourists, and they go to the opera, and the Italians are so full-throated singing with the opera and just open and passionate, and the British are so reserved, and they sing very apologetically. So he has this very witty way of showing cultural differences and showing connections that happen through that. When you get to Howard's End, that novel, the one that has Only Connect at the beginning, he's got two families that collide. One is extremely creative and very intellectual and artsy, and the other family is very business and very little emotion. And those two families come together, and one of the protagonists, whose name is Meg, says, Only Connect, all through that book. There's more to it than that, but it is. And then his final pièce de la résistance book is Passage to India. I'm sure some of you have heard of that, perhaps you've read it. That one is just infused with universal love. The way his prose describes the rocks and stones coming to life, the trees, the sky, the heat, it's almost like he's channeling Jainism, which is an Indian religion that talks about continuous, consistent consciousness in all things. I don't think the British colonialist ever got that. But it's a really beautiful book, and it's all about connection and oneness. The movies, if you've seen them, don't really do justice. I have to say, you should. I'm not being a teacher here. You must read these. One of the good things we got out of the movies was Helena Bonham Carter, though. She started out in those movies that were on his books. So he points out how social class and conventions can really hinder connections. But he also points out how it is possible to have meaningful connections between people with vastly different backgrounds. So he really does come to the conclusion, and throughout all of his books, that if we don't have genuine connection and relations, then we can suffer isolation, we can suffer from all kinds of emptiness inside, And so he believes, and I agree, that friendships, family, and personal relations are really important for our personal well-being. And we know that here, but it's something. We look at the relationships in your life and see where there may be some things that you could do. So he's basically tackling our tendency to deny our oneness in all of his books and making bridges. I was really taken with his books as a student and as a young person because his characters were often on a journey of self-discovery, learning about themselves, learning about individuals around them, learning about the world. And what resonated with me back then was that in every one of his books, cumulatively, you find out that he really promotes that the value of personal relations in our lives is a cornerstone of the human experience. What's a cornerstone? A cornerstone is what everything else relies on. Everything else relies on personal relations. And if I look at that from a spiritual standpoint, I can equate that to oneness. I can equate that to connection. And I agree and I believe as a reader and student of his works that personal relations are the cornerstone of my experience, because oneness is a cornerstone of the spiritual experience. And what's really enriching about reading his books is that he really encourages readers to try to figure out how the people are going to connect in the face of adversity. It's really easy to connect with people when there's no adversity, right? How tough is that? So when you throw in the adversity, that's where we're needing to remember our oneness. And adversity also makes for a good book. It's kind of boring if there's no adversity in a plot. So for people that are new here, oneness is remembering that we're all expressions from one source, that we're all expressions of spirit, from one God, from one mind, from one love, however you want to call that magnificent, infinite source of life that's expressing uniquely as all of us here. We're all connected. We all are family. That's what oneness means to us in this teaching. And it's one of the primary principles that we teach here. So we just have to keep practicing it because we don't remember it. How can we not remember that? That's so weird. It's so primary. But I'm going to quote from Jesus because James is here, and James knows all about Jesus. So when Jesus was asked, what's the most important commandment? He answered, thou shalt love. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and all thy strength and with all thy mind. And then he added, and thy neighbor as thyself. Not love one another if they vote the way you do, or if they just agree on the big stuff. Just love, period. Love one another, period, because love is not agreement. Love is alignment. It's alignment with the truth that there's no separation in God. Oneness. St. John the Apostle, James, said, you can't love God whom you haven't seen unless you can love humans whom you have seen. The way to love God is to love your fellow human. Caring. Thou shalt care. Thou shalt show unbreakable goodwill to everyone that comes into thine orbit, for this is the way to love God. Love thy neighbor. You know, there's a story about Michelangelo when he was walking around in a builder's yard, and he saw this piece of marble over in the corner, and it was cracked and stained, and he said to the builder, what are you going to do with that bit? And the builder said, oh, it's useless, it's cracked, it's stained, it's shapeless, it's useless. And Michelangelo said, bring it around to my studio, please. There's an angel imprisoned in there, and I can set it free. And we know that about all each other, right? There are angels imprisoned in us, and we can set them free when we love one another across the divides. Those are the angels that are waiting to come out when we make connections. So seeing the importance of connection and oneness as being more powerful than the things that divide us, that's the cornerstone of our human experience. Forster he wrote an essay, and I know this is still literary 101, but you're going to love this. But Forster once said in an essay called What I Believe, he said, "I hate the idea of causes. And if I had to choose between betraying my country and betraying my friend, I hope I should have the guts to betray my country." That's quite something, isn't it? He was writing just pre-World War I, not World War I, sorry, World War II, and it was a reflection on the way the world was becoming quite unraveled. So that was his context. But personal relations are the cornerstone. Oneness is the cornerstone of our experience. Our love for one another based on our unity as expressions of God is the cornerstone of our experience. And everything depends on it. We're faced with so much division right now. I don't even have to tell you how much I made a list when I was first writing out this outline, and it was a long page, and it was going to take 5 minutes to get through. There's so many things. And I don't need to list them for you because you know what they are, and it's more than just politics. But they kind of collude to divide us, to supersede our relationships with our friends and our families. He dealt with these things too at his time when he was writing in the first half of the last century. And on the personal front, this last month, I have had so much division in my life. It's really quite, it's as though God was preparing me to do this talk. I had a really awkward, weird, disagreeable situation with a couple of colleagues 2 different times. I had some disagreements with friends, and I had one with a client, and then one with the neighbor's little dog. That was all just in the past months. God wanted me to remember how important personal relations are to me, and oneness, and gave me those things to remember that oneness matters most. Loving thy neighbor matters most. Loving thy neighbor's dog matters most. Fortunately, most of these divisions were healed by connecting through very respectful dialogue, in most cases, even with the dog, and then also uproarious laughter sometimes solved it. But in all of the cases, God's grace presided because we invited God in. Our will to connect, our will to remember our oneness is the bridge that we need. We have to remember where there's no division and where there's no separation, because it's in our shared humanity. We are sharing our lives because we're all expressed through one source. We know what it feels like to have oneness. We do. Madison Avenue has no problem making you cry or laugh. They know. They can take a little pile of puppies and put a little kid in the middle and make you cry for a Pepsi ad. Or they can have you see Betty White as a football player and make you laugh. Or they can have you inheriting your parents' behaviors as an insurance company. We laugh at these things. They know what's universally human. And we've experienced when we're at the movies, we laugh together and we cry together. That's oneness. Or we scream when the home team makes a point. Yay! How uplifting is oneness? We know it, we feel it in our hearts. We don't say, I'm experiencing oneness now. We know it. It's joyous. But separation feels heavy and tiring. It just does. Aren't you tired? I'm tired. So how do we bridge these divides in our own personal relations? I've got 3 little things I want to point out. 1, we start with courage. Courage. I had a little reunion with some college friends recently in Arizona, and the person that was hosting lives in Arizona, and she's very Republican. She's very, very right-wing. And another friend flew in from New York who is very Democrat and left-wing. And then I flew in from Seattle, and I consider myself a free thinker. I'm kind of an independent person, but I'll lean left, and I'm being transparent about that. But we got together, and once we were sitting on her porch, we were having our little, margaritas and stuff like that. And the hostess said, "There will be no discussion of politics this weekend." And so my friend from New York and I said, okay. It was a little disappointing to me because I felt as though we could maybe have something, but that was not going to happen. So this was a missed opportunity. But I really, as the weekend grew on, I really kind of wished that I had acted differently. This is where I didn't feel like I expressed the courage that I'm talking to you about right now. Now, as it happens, there was the rally, the first national rally in April of the whole country getting together to do these simultaneous things in opposition to the current administration. And my friend from New York really wanted to go. And we were talking about, well, we can't be rude because she might have plans for us. She might not really appreciate that. And so I didn't really bring it up, but my friend from New York brought it up. The New Yorker asked about it. And my friend from the hostess said, well, I don't want to do that. And we were like, well, duh. Yeah, of course you don't want to do that. But we wanted to respect her. So we just let it go. We let it go. So the next morning, we were going to the breakfast table, and our hostess said, you know, I've been thinking about this, and I think that you two should be able to express your First Amendment rights. So I'm going to drive you to the rally, and then I'm going to drive back, and then I'll come and get you, and then we'll come home. And that is not a small thing, because that was 2 hours of driving on her part, because she lives half an hour outside of town. What a great gesture. What a bridge she built for us to maintain our personal relations in the face of what could have been politically divisive. But I have to say that the censoring of the conversation still was plaguing me, and I really, really wish that I had brought it up, because she's somebody that I respect immensely. She's worked in government for decades. She's smart. And I know that I could have remained calm, and I wouldn't have engaged in the conversation with the intention to agree. That's not going to happen, but I want to listen, and I want to learn. But I was too chicken. I didn't do it. Baby steps. It would have been way more courageous of us both to have that conversation, because people avoid talking about issues with people who have different perspectives to keep the peace. But we're polarizing ourselves further and further and further, and that is dangerous. That's dangerous. It takes courage to broach topics with people who don't agree with you, to find common values underneath. And I submit you can do it graciously. You can do it with God. You can do it with love and authenticity and caring. Because underneath, we have a lot in common. We do. We just need to allow Spirit in to give us the grace, because when we're authentic and loving and kind, anything can happen. And we could maybe even collaborate on some of the issues that we agree on and find some solutions together. Imagine that. Now, if you don't think you can remain calm in a conversation like that with somebody who doesn't agree with you, please do not try this at home. No. The second thing, besides courage, the second thing is listening with an open heart and from a place of neutrality. Be present, because presence is a healing force. Or I should say a healing power. I would label this little part of my talk conversations instead of cancellations. You know, recently, in the last few years, we've had this cancel culture, and it's really easy to just shut people out and cut people off and refuse to engage when they offend us or they hurt our feelings or we just disagree. And canceling people is really tempting. It's really tempting. Can you imagine if God canceled us when we were going somewhere that, I mean, the universe would be a ghost town. And if I were God, I would have canceled me ages ago. If I were God, I would have canceled a lot of you ages ago, too. So, I've got another friend who is 180 degrees different from me in politics and way more active than the friend that I was just talking about in Arizona. This friend's younger than me and is really crazily, very rapid fire on the social media. And she posted tons of right-wing memes and articles and videos and all this kind of stuff. And I was kind of surprised by the frequency by which she was doing this. And a lot of people I know had to unfriend her because they were really disturbed by her posts. They were just appalled. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that because I have a solid foundation of love for this person. This person's done amazing things for me. He's been extraordinarily generous towards me. I can't just turn off the switch because of some Facebook rants and just be done with it. The foundation that we have as friends is a lot more solid than the politics that shows up on her Facebook page. I value personal relations over politics. I value personal relations over nearly everything. I mean, it really takes a whole lot for you to lose me as a friend, just so you know, before you befriend me. I mean, personal relations are the cornerstone of the human experience, and personal relations are our relationship with spirit. Remember, we can't love God whom we've not seen unless we can love people whom we have seen. And Facebook, although it promotes that it connects people, it's really kind of a challenging place for true connection, isn't it? I mean, it's just, the anonymity just allows people to be completely shaming and blaming and calling people names and accusing. And can you imagine if we were in the same room and people behaved the way they do on Facebook? And, you know, if you wanted to put a negative emoji, you would just go, or maybe you would just clock them in the head, do the sweeping left. I want to get rid of you. Swipe, swipe, swipe. But I often really felt my cheeks burning when I would go online to try to make a comment on her site because it was really messy on there, and it was just not a place where oneness presides. And I was not my best either. I was not promoting oneness up there either. Pretty soon it evolved to a place where all of the people on there decided that it wasn't the best place to discuss this sort of thing. I was like, okay, yay, that's a great conclusion, let's just not do this. But the simple truth is everyone wants to be seen and heard. All of us do. But it might not be the best place to do it on Facebook. So when this friend visited recently, she came to town, we sat down and we actually had a really civilized conversation together. And it turns out that we both agree that a lot of times media and Facebook and social media and all these things have a lot of different biases that you can't really easily get the whole picture. And she could not be more opposite in her philosophy and politics than I. Could not possible for anyone to be more opposite. But we do have the same fundamental values underneath it. We just disagree on how the solutions should come about. We can't let politics be higher than our friendship. And Spirit presided over this conversation, and we were so surprised by how lifted it was for both of us. We didn't agree. So be curious and listen and listen more. We need to be curious about what people believe and what they feel. We can't shut each other out. We can't oppress other people for their beliefs. Does getting along with somebody mean you agree? No. Does connection mean that you submit to things that abuse you or others? No. You don't have to agree. You just have to listen and invite people in, because that's loving your neighbor, and that's loving spirit, and that's loving yourself. Back to E.M. Forster, since we're in our Literature 101 class. He doesn't preach specifically about connection that blatantly, but he shows it. In Passage to India, in a mosque, there's an Indian doctor who connects and sees this British woman with a completely different everything. I mean, the British and the Indians, very different in all ways. In a London living room in Howard's End, the family, the rich family, he talks with a poor clerk, and they share something together. These moments happen not because they share beliefs, but because someone dared to listen humbly and generously. So you're quiet. So number 3, the last thing, be for something and against nothing. I know that this community has heard that a lot in this teaching. For anyone new, Ernest Holmes, our founder of this teaching, he said, find me one person who is for something and against nothing, who's redeemed enough not to condemn others out of the burden of his soul, and I'll find another Savior, another Jesus, and an exalted human being. In our teaching, being for something illustrates how focusing on the positive gives you positive outcomes rather than focusing on what you don't want, right? Some of you have taken Beyond Limits in other classes. Focusing on peace instead of being against war. Because all of your attention and your intention, when it goes into things you don't want, and this includes chasing your dreams are great. They're up there. They're something you can look toward that's positive for you, rather than running away and paying attention to what you want to get away from and avoid. So back at that rally in Arizona, I was really trying to find not a God sign, like a sign, to walk like a picket sign. And they were selling signs, and I hadn't been prepared to have a sign, so I was looking around, but I can't take the negativity and the toxicity of a lot of those signs that they were selling. I couldn't, but I was looking really hard to find something that was for something. And I found this little itty-bitty bumper sticker that said, health care for all. Health care for all. We need to rise above the level of the problem, as Einstein says. We need to be for human dignity. We need to be for equality. We need to be for freedom that harms no one. For peace rather than against war. And we can't be against people. Because if we're against people, it means you're against yourself, because we're all one, remember? That's what we're talking about this morning, is remembering that. And negativity begets more negativity. We're not in a powerful place, as Kathy Ann has said, when you saw some of the levels of energy that she showed, when people are being better and oppressing, and I don't care what you think, I'm right, and all that. That just isn't where we want to live. It's not in a joyous place. Speaking for being for something, and it was just, I'm an exhibit designer in my other life, and I went to the museum conference in Los Angeles recently, and there was a session called Love Letters to the IMLS. That's a very insider, nerdy kind of thing, but the IMLS is the Institute of Museum and Library Sciences. And it was a dark time at that conference because the NIH, the NEH, the NEA, and the IMLS had all been decimated. Their staffs had been cut. And those are a lot of the funding sources for museums and libraries to create content that inspires and teaches people. So there was this thing, Love Letters to the IMLS. So I thought, what's that? I'm going to go to that. But I was kind of worried that it might be a gripe session because it had just happened. The cutting of the IMLS had just happened. And I went in there, and I was so delighted because people stood up, and actually the former director of the IMLS was there, and she was kind of teary-eyed because people stood up and said, when I was a beginning exhibit developer at the Science Center, and I wrote to the IMLS for a grant, and Catherine there helped me get it, and then she helped me figure out how to do it, and then we had this amazing exhibit. Someone else stands up. And Jonathan, he helped me with this. It was people commending and affirming people who helped them in that department. It wasn't a faceless government bureaucratic thing. It was people. And they were being appreciated. And it wasn't a gripe fest. It was a high consciousness experience. And I left that room feeling very hopeful that something better is going to happen with that Institute of Museum and Library Sciences. The people that work there are going to have even better jobs, or there's going to be a better source for this, because museums are one of the last bastions of trusted primary source material, along with libraries. And they were bolstering each other. They're for something. Not one word about anything about the people that did the cuts. It was all about what they're for. Now, E.M. Forster might not have explicitly used the phrase, be for something and against nothing, but his writing lives it. In his essays, we meet people who choose love over ideology, and they choose friendship over allegiance. They choose presence over pride. He believed in connection, but not as a tactic, but as a really quiet, courageous way to live. So remembering that we're connected and that we belong to each other helps us to see that we need to stop treating people as the enemy. We need to start building trust, not just with those who vote like us, but with everyone. We have really serious things in this country to deal with, and in the rest of the world. And the longer we treat each other as enemies, the more vulnerable we become to the thing that's going to come over and just destroy all of us. We have to remember in this country that the Constitution begins with "we the people." Not "we the people who agree with me sometimes" people. So let's stop fighting and start building something good. Start building something better together. So in closing, Forster in his essay, because I have to bring you back to your class, he said, "I do not believe in belief, but I believe in love." In a world full of arguments over who is right, it's not belief that binds us, but love. The real, living, present force that connects us beyond opinion, politics, or creed. So we let go of needing to agree. I know that's hard, let go of needing to agree. We lean instead into the greater truth that underneath it all, we belong to each other. So in closing, rather than a closing prayer, I would love it if you would feel like it to join in an affirmation with me where I say something and you repeat back. Yeah. I release the need to be right.
I release the need to be right.
I choose to be love.
I choose to be love.
I'm part of something greater.
I'm part of something greater.
And it lives through me now.
And it lives through me now.
Each and every one of us is special.
Each and every one of us is special.
All of us belong.
All of us belong.
And so it is.
And so it is.
Thank you. Thank you.